Good afternoon YouTube, my name is Rob Pollard, I'm the developer for Sojour, the solo VTT, and this video is going to be all about Sojour 2, and hopefully it'll shed light on maybe some of the mysteries, things, why I'm doing certain things, and what to expect in the future basically. So this diagram, what it does, on the left it shows you where we are, and on the right it shows you where we want to go, and in the middle it's like, whoa, how are we going to do this? So let's talk a little bit about what we currently have. So Sojour right now, it uses .NET 4.8.1 framework, and that is the latest framework, but it should be noted that Microsoft stopped actively developing on that for quite a while now, and they've since moved to .NET Core, and the current .NET Core is .NET 10. So the technology that Sojour is currently built on is actually quite old, and Sojour is also a 32-bit application, and yeah, we'll talk more about that later because that has quite a significant impact on how we're going to do things. And then finally, right at the bottom, you can see that Sojour is being coded in Visual Studio 2017, and I guess the year gives it away just how old my dev environment is. It's what, 9 years old, so yeah, it's basically not the latest technology. And what, Sojour's been out, what, 4 years? I think even when it got released 4 years ago, it wasn't the latest technology either. So yeah, and it's that older technology that is restricting me and the things that I want to do. And there are some things that a lot of customers have been asking for, such as a dark mode, which I just can't do with the current technology stack because of the bugs in that stack. I did have a go at it. I think there are 2 blog entries about that. I might add them to the description, but it couldn't be done. It was causing way too much damage to my code. Hence why I want to create Sojour 2, and the difference between the two is Sojour 2 will use the latest and greatest of everything pretty much. And that will really open doors for what I can do with Sojour, a lot more than what we can do now. Because the problem with the current technology stack is I'm really pushing its limits, and I'm even doing a few things that perhaps I shouldn't be doing with it, but I can do it. And I think it's about time we move to something a little bit more recent than 2017. So if we look on the right, the target, Sojour 2, I'm going to be targeting .NET 10, which is the latest version of .NET Core. I think there's an 11 out now, but I don't think that's a long duration one. I need to check though. It'll be 64-bit, and the little writing right at the bottom, that's actually quite important. Sojour 2 will be free for all existing Sojour customers. There will be no charge. The way I look at it, you've all been loyal customers. You jumped on and paid for Sojour from a developer who you know nothing about, because I'm hardly famous. So I don't have any like big company or anything. And you know, you've taken the gamble, paid your $10, and hopefully you've got value out of it. But by doing that, you've joined the roller coaster that is Sojour. And anyone that's been with Sojour since the beginning will have seen how far it's developed. It's had so much new features added to it. It's almost quite a different application. And I see 2.0 as a continuation of that development. I don't see it as like a line in the sand, here's another app. I see it as a continuation, even though it is going to be a rewrite. And it has to be a rewrite because of the technology involved. So I guess the next thing I want to talk about is, okay, we know where we are, we know where we want to go, how are we going to do it? And I did a lot of research on this, and in the end I came to the conclusion that the user interface controls that come with .NET by default are terrible. I know they're terrible because in Sojour, the current version, I've had to add so much workaround codes to fix Microsoft's bugs. It's just insane the amount of workarounds I've had to do, and that's not how I should be writing software. I should be just writing my bits, not their bits as well. So I've decided I'm actually going to invest in professional level user interface components. And all of these components will have the very latest Windows look and feel. And more importantly, the library I'm choosing, DevExpress, and I did look at a lot of libraries, it has so many components, many of which I can only dream of having. and that really opens doors into what I can put into Sojour. And even some of its mundane stuff, they'll just make a big difference straight away. Like, for example, dark mode is default. It defaults to supporting dark mode. I don't have to do any coding really. So that's one instant win. It comes with an awesome component that is in effect a word processor, an advanced word processor. And I can imagine putting that into Sojour's journal, so you get much more advanced formatting options within your journals. And again, that should almost be a free option, although it will need some integration work. And then finally, off the top of my head, it comes with enterprise level PDF support, which is a big bonus, because in Sojour right now, I'm using a web browser to display PDFs, WebView 2 to be specific, and that really limits what I can do with the PDFs. It really does limit it, whereas by having an enterprise level interface into PDFs, it will enable Sojour to interact more directly with those PDFs, and maybe we'll be able to do some really cool things with that. But it certainly provides a whole host of options. So DevExpress does sound like the holy grail, but the downside is the cost. Oh boy. It's expensive, and it's a subscription as well, so it's not like I'm paying several thousands at once. It's a recurring cost. So it is going to cost, but I've looked at everything. I looked at what it provides, and I think for me, in order to bring Sojour up to the next level, I think it's a no-brainer. It does mean, though, that when Sojour 2 comes out, I'll inevitably have to raise the price of Sojour. I mean, it's been at $10 since it came out 4 years ago. Sojour 1 will stay at $10 until Sojour 2 comes out, and then I'll probably hike it up to $20. And even at $20, I still think you're getting great value, because firstly, it's a lot cheaper than most of the other VTTs, quite a lot cheaper, even at $20. But also, Sojour 2 will follow the same philosophy as Sojour 1, where it's a one-off payment. There are no servers, no subscriptions, and no DRM. So that in of itself makes that $20 even more valuable. But that's a long way down the line. I anticipate it's going to take around 2 years to knock up Sojour 2, because it is a ground-up development. But that's dependent on the free time that I get, because this is not my day job. My day job is doing web development, and there are occasions where you're hard at work coding, you come home and then you're thinking, I'm shattered, I can't do any coding, I need to rest the old brain cells ready for the following day. And that happens more often than not. So it does limit how much time I can put on the Sojour project, because obviously I have to prioritize work, because that's the thing that's feeding me every day, basically. So yeah, I estimate 2 years, but I don't know. So that's the overall plan, is to produce Sojour 2 on the very latest and greatest, and to use for the first time professional level components. Now, the first fly in the ointment, which you might have noticed if you looked at the bottom of this slide, this square box, is the supported integrated development environments. So you'll notice that Visual Studio 2017 is not on that list. Now, I don't blame DevExpress, because let's face it, 2017 was a long time ago, and why should they support it? So yeah, I basically have to change my development environment in order to make this happen. Now, of the list of the 4 options that are on display there, JetBrains is out of the question, because there's a cost implication. In fact, I think that's a regular cost implication. And it's a completely different IDE. It's one I've never used before, and I suspect I'll be fighting that whilst I'm coding, which I don't want to do. Because the thing is that I've been using Visual Studio since, the mid-90s, so I have a lot of experience in Visual Studio, and I'd much rather stick with what I know. So that leaves the other three options, which is 2019, 2022 or 2026. And although there are three options there, it turns out that when you go to Microsoft, unless you already own 2022 or 2019, you can't get hold of them. You have to go to the latest and greatest, which in this case is 2026. So if I want to go Dev Express, I have to go Visual Studio 2026. That's the bottom line. That's not a problem though, because Microsoft are quite gracious in this, in that they have a free version of 2026 called the Community Edition. And when you look at the licensing, it suits indie developers like me perfectly. So there's only one of me, but I am literally one person, and that qualifies for the license. And my income from Sojour is well below their threshold, well below. So I am entitled to use their Community Edition, which is free. And that's great, because it means that I can actually download 2026 and use it. And that's why it's green on the diagram there, because I have been using it. Not on Sojour 1, because I can't, and we'll explain why in a minute or two. But I have been using it, and it's actually a pretty good dev environment. And in fact, the other good reason for using 2026 is although Microsoft release lots of different .NET versions as they continually improve it, they don't tend to provide access to the later versions in their earlier IDEs. So for example, in Visual Studio 2017, I could not do .NET 10 development, even if I wanted to, because it's just not available. So okay, we now have a plan. Everything looks cool. We are going to use VS 1026, which I already have. I've tested it, and we're going to write Sojour 2. However, whilst doing this, I've ran into two showstoppers, which we'll discuss now. So the first showstopper is, it turns out Visual Studio 2026 only supports 64-bit applications. It does not support 32-bit. And that's a bit of a bummer. Now, it has to be said, normally for a developer, switching an app from 32-bit to 64-bit is actually quite easy. It's literally, you go into the project file, find the drop down which says x86, and then pick x64, and that's all you've got to do. So it shouldn't be that much of a problem, but for Sojour it is. And the reason why is Sojour uses its own custom graphics engine for the maps called Ionian. And Ionian is an engine I wrote a long time ago, back in the early 2000s. And because Ionian is so old, it's reliant upon many DirectX 9 components, and those components are 32-bit. And because they are 32-bit, it makes it impossible to convert Ionian to 64-bit. It just cannot be done. I have tried, and it can't be done. So the problem we have, our immediate problem, is we need a graphics engine, because we don't have one. The one that I've been using up to now will not work. The other surprising issue I discovered is that the technology I use for writing my installers, Wix version 3, also doesn't work in Visual Studio 2026 because of the way they changed tooling support. I guess that's the price of progress. And people might not know, but installers are actually really, really difficult to write. You'll be amazed at how difficult they are. In fact, I still remember the month it took me to write Sojour's original installers, and it was a nightmare. And it looks like I'm going to be going through that same nightmare again, so really looking forward to that. So okay, we got two big showstoppers. They're not insurmountable, but it means more work, basically. So the first thing I need to address is the graphics engine. We cannot write Sojour 2 without a graphics engine, because we need it for the maps, amongst other things. Now, I did briefly consider using an off-the-shelf one, something like Unity or whatever, but based on experiences, commercial experiences, I am not going to pursue that. So for example, I think when Sojour released around 4 years ago, the CEO of Unity decided to monetize his indie developers, as CEOs do. And it was really bad because not only was he going to charge them, but he was going to backdate the charges, I think for around a year or something stupid. And what it meant is all these indie developers got these emails from a large company demanding thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars. And that's a really stressful position to be in as an indie dev, because you're like me, one person. You're not in a real company. You're a sole trader, and when you're getting official documents that look very legal from rather large companies demanding thousands of pounds, it's stressful, and it's not a path I want to go down. As it turned out in Unity's case, the entire internet exploded with anger, and I think it resulted in them backtracking and their CEO being fired, basically. But nevertheless, not a nice experience. And the other issues, the other reasons why I didn't go down this route is a lot of the graphics engines that you can get these days, they're general purpose. So they've got to be all things to all men, or all people, if you're going to be politically correct. And the problem you have there is it makes them complex, a lot more complex than perhaps they would be if they were solely focused on doing one thing. And it just so happens that there is one thing that all of my graphics engines are being focused on, and that is enabling dynamic resolutions. So you probably know this from a lot of your games that you own, but most graphics engines, they kind of demand that up front you tell them what your resolution you're going to use. Are you going to do 1080p? Are you going to do 4K? And what's more, they tend to give you very fixed sets of resolutions, and that's it. You don't get a choice. Whereas all of my graphics engines have been designed to be embedded within a window, and because of that, I've always designed them to support dynamic resolutions. So, like Sojour right now, you can make your maps as big or as small as you want, and the graphics engine doesn't bat an eyelid. And you can even dynamically resize them. And again, my graphics engine doesn't bat an eyelid. And for DirectX 9, which Ionian is based on, that was no mean feat. And luckily for us, Dorian does the same thing, and I can actually show you that after this presentation. But it's a very important feature if we're to deliver Sojour, and it's one of those features it's best when the engine natively supports that in a very simple to use way. So the bottom line is I've had to rewrite the graphics engine, and for those who don't know, it's a very specialist subject, incredibly specialist, because of the complexities inherent in writing an engine. And I wrote Ionian, early 2000s, and for me it's been incredibly successful because after I wrote it, I hadn't needed to touch its code ever. I could just use it in all of the various projects that I've written that do use it, and it hides away all of the scary complexities of doing graphical work, and that's great. But what it's meant is that over the last 20 years of using it, I've kind of forgotten how to write a graphics engine because it's not knowledge I've ever needed. I kind of learnt everything I needed to know back in the early 2000s, wrote the engine, and then slowly but surely started to forget stuff. So to write Dorian, I've had to relearn a whole bunch of new things, especially as Dorian is DirectX 11 based. And for the uninitiated, you're probably thinking, well, that's just the difference of two numbers between DX9 and DX11. What could be so bad? But it turns out they're massively different. They have completely different ways of modelling things. So it's almost like I had to go straight to the drawing board and learn everything from scratch. And in fact, I had to create a POC in order to learn how to code DirectX 11. And POC, for those who don't know, is proof of concept. So the Dorian bit is green now because I have started to work on it. I've been working on it, in fact, for the last 3 months, I think. So yeah, I'm very much working on that. And it's one of the reasons why when you look at my recent blog posts and maybe some of my recent YouTube videos, they've all been showing weird floaty cubes moving around with real-time shadows. And I know that some of you are probably looking at these blog posts now going, what is he doing? He should be writing a VTT or updating a VTT, but he's doing instead these weird cube things. But there is a method to the madness, and that, as you can appreciate from this presentation, I have to give you a graphics engine, a 64-bit graphics engine. Because if I don't, you don't have any maps. So it's something I have to do. It's very high risk because it's a very specialist subject. It's very complex, and it's also one of those components that you can't really start Sojour to until you have a graphics engine. And basically, I mean, you could, but then you probably find you have to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. So it doesn't make sense to do it that way around. And that is why I am working on Dorian right now. And I'd say that in terms of progress, I'm a little over halfway, maybe under halfway, certainly around the halfway mark, because theoretically, I could use Dorian right now for Sojour 2 development if Sojour 2 does exactly the same things as Sojour 1. But I want to write Dorian so that it matches Ionian's functionality. And the reason for that is, first of all, it gives me options in Sojour 2's development going forward. And secondly, it's just a lot more efficient because it's best that I complete the engine whilst all the low-level graphic stuff's in my head, because you give it a month or two after I finish writing Dorian, I would have forgotten everything, because that's just the nature of the beast. If you don't continually work in a particular area, you just start to forget things. So it's much more efficient for me to get Dorian done in one foul swoop, basically. So that's where I'm at. I'm creating Dorian, and Dorian is written on VS 2026, so I'm gaining valuable experience on how to use that. And it is coded in .NET 10. It is 64-bit, and it has to be 64-bit, otherwise this whole thing's pointless. And it's using some really modern architectures like ECS, so it's a pretty good system right now. And in fact, even in its current uncompleted form, it already has one massive advantage over Ionian, and that is it can render to multiple windows at the same time. And that is going to give us so many advantages, because Ionian can only render one window at a time. It's one of the reasons why Sojour, the version you have, you can only see one map at a time. So you might have 4 or 5 of them open, but when you click the tabs, only one of them is ever visible at once. And that's because of a limitation in Ionian. But that limitation goes away with Dorian, and that enables me to do some really awesome things on the mapping. At least if I get my way. So it's already going to pay dividends, even though it's costing quite a bit of time. Now the Wix installer problem, I've looked at that in detail, and it turns out there is a version 4 and a version 5, which unfortunately I have to pay for, which as an indie developer I don't like paying for things, and I think 4 and 5 are both compatible with 2026, which is great. But, and here's the big but, looking through their documentation, they pretty much scrapped everything in V3. Like, everything's gone. So V4 and V5 are very, very different from V3. Very, very different. And that is going to be a pain, because, as I say, the Wix version 3, it wasn't so much a learning curve as a learning cliff. It was an absolute nightmare of headbanging, trying to do things, scouring the internet for answers. I mean, the positive side is you only write an installer once, but oh boy, what a journey that was. And I'm expecting a similar journey with 4 or 5, or possibly even some other technology that I might end up picking. The big advantage with it, though, is unlike Dorian, I can leave the installer until the end, and in fact, in terms of the way the project's going to be run, it's better it's left at the end, because that way Sojour 2 will be built, all of its components will be in place, and I'll know what the installer needs to install. So it's very beneficial to leave that to the end, but it does mean that at some point near the end of Sojour 2's development, I'm going to be spending a month or two banging my head against a brick wall trying to get an installer written, because they are complex. And the thing with them is they need to integrate into your automated development environment, because Sojour is created in an automated environment. I have a build server, I have a release server, and all of those need to be configured to build the installer for us. So it's all tightly integrated. It's going to be a pain in the rear, basically. So to reiterate what the current plan is, just to give you a high-level view. So the current plan is write the graphics engine. We need a graphics engine for Sojour, otherwise there's no maps. So that's what I'm doing right now. And like I say, I apologise right now for the blog posts you're inevitably going to get, which are going to show floating cubes and other weird things. I apologise for that, but it is a critical path, absolute necessity, because if we don't have that, we don't have maps. And I guess by VTT standards, we don't have a VTT. So it has to be done. It's going to cost time. There's no two ways about it. Graphics engines are not trivial things. And in fact, when I learnt I couldn't use Ionian, my mouth dropped, because I thought, oh my God, that's going to be a ton of work. And it is. I mean, it's been fun, I won't deny that, but it is a ton of work. And it's in areas where I'm having to learn a lot, which is, I guess, good for me as a software developer, but it slows things down somewhat. I think that's the best way I can describe that. Anyway, once that engine's complete, the next thing I'm going to do is put my money where my mouth is and buy DevExpress, or at least rent it. And that's going to cost me a lot of money. But I have money set aside specifically for that occasion. So that is happening, because I want Sojour 2 to have the latest and greatest UI features that we can possibly get our hands on. And after extensive research, DevExpress was the way to go. And it provides me with many technological options as well. So I buy DevExpress, and at that point, I'm actually going to be writing Sojour 2 itself. And it won't be completely from scratch, because looking at DevExpress's documentation, they've kept a lot of their APIs and interfaces very similar to what's already in C#. So theoretically, a lot of the code that's already in Sojour can be ported across. And that's a good thing, because Sojour is relatively stable right now, and it always takes time for code to mature and become stable. And it's good that we're bringing in mature code into Sojour 2, but it'll be .NET 10, it'll be 64-bit, and it'll be taking advantage of the marvelous brand new components that DevExpress are going to give us. Like I say, this is a huge undertaking. I think it's the right thing to do for a whole bunch of reasons. The first is obviously the fact that I'm being straitjacketed by the technology in Sojour 1. I'm also hacking off a lot of you customers, and I'm sorry about that, about dark mode. I did try, I have evidence that in my blog. I did try, but I just can't deliver it to you with the current tech stack. This new rewrite will give you that and more. So I think it's necessary in that regard, but also it's necessary in, I guess, de-risking forward support, because you know Microsoft, they might turn up tomorrow and say, oh, by the way, DirectX 9 is no longer supported in Windows 11. And if they say that, that's it. Everybody Sojour is going to stop working. And my name will be poo forever and ever, which is why I want to make this jump to the latest and greatest tech to basically extend Sojour's life. But I am genuinely excited. I know it's going to be a lot of work. I know it's going to take 2 years, at least 2 years. But on the plus side, you folks will be getting something very special, I think. Something that will make the current Sojour look like a toy. And what's more, because of the tech that's going into it, it will enable me to do so many things that I've always wanted to do with Sojour 1 that I couldn't. And it just fills me with excitement. And I hope it will you when it eventually gets released. And as I said, just to make sure there's no ambiguity, everybody that's an existing Sojour 1 customer gets this for free. It's kind of like my thank you to you folks for taking the plunge and buying Sojour in the first place. I'm a great believer in customer loyalty. So I guess that's the high-level presentation. I'll do now, I'll quickly show you Dorian. I think a lot of you have already seen it from videos that have been posted. So this is the Dorian graphics engine. This is from a month ago. I think it's about a month ago. My laptop actually has the latest build on it. And you can see already it's looking pretty swish in what it can do. So you've got real-time lighting with real-time shadows. You've got real-time light detection. So it's detecting, I've not told it where the sun is, it's detecting where the sun is and automatically generated the shadows and the lighting. And look how smooth it's running as well. It's rendering to 3 completely different windows, which is, by the way, what we absolutely want, what the controls can do with some work. But that's for obviously when we integrate it into Sojour. But as you can see, it runs very smoothly. It looks pretty swish. And more importantly, it supports the dynamic resizing, which is an absolute must for any of my developments. Otherwise, you'll all probably be a little bit hacked off when you can't resize your map. So yeah, it dynamically resizes. That's one of the reasons why I write my engines. And the other reason why I write my engines is because they're simple. At least compared with the commercial ones, because my engines are laser focused on one specific thing. So they are relatively simple to work on. Now in this case, these 3 windows, they're all rendering the same scene, but from different cameras. But Dorian does support like multiple scenes. So if you look at the POC, which as I say is proof of concept, in that one I actually do render 3 completely independent and different scenes, which you can see here, and they're all independently movable and so forth. So the tech is there. And I suppose I'll explain a little bit about what the POC is all about, because you would have probably seen the POC and Dorian and you're probably thinking, why has he got 2? What is he wasting time on 2? And so the point of a proof of concept is to give a developer the ability to learn a new technology, especially if the technology you're trying to learn is really complicated. And believe me, DirectX 11 and writing a graphics engine is complicated. And the great thing with this POC is not only did I learn a lot, but I also made quite a lot of big mistakes in it. And because of that, it meant that when I wrote Dorian proper, those mistakes didn't come across. So like one of the mistakes, for example, was I tried to make Dorian the same as Ionian. And the idea being that I could take Ionian out, drop Dorian in, and away we go. Job's a good one. But it turns out that was a bad move, because Ionian is DirectX 9. It uses DirectX 9 concepts. And by limiting it to DirectX 9 concepts, you massively limit what you can do with it. So the POC was very DirectX 9-ish, even though it's using DirectX 11, whereas the real engine is using 11 through and through. And in fact, it's coded so that 11 is in its own isolated layer. The idea being that I can replace that with 12 or Vulkan should the time come. I actually was thinking of doing 12, but after researching it, I decided for me it's a waste of time. Because the problem with 12 is, as a developer, you have to write a lot of boilerplate code that 11 already does. And you need to ask yourself one very valid question. That boilerplate code, can you make it better than the stuff that's already in DirectX 11? And I would wager that unless you're a full-time graphics engineer, the answer to that question will be no. And based on some AAA games I've seen, I think the answer is no, even if you know what you're doing, because I know a lot of AAA games where their DirectX 11 versions run better than the DirectX 12 versions. I mean, DirectX 12 has the potential to run better than 11, but you really, really, really need to know what you're doing. And I don't think everybody does. I certainly don't, which is why I went for 11 in the end. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty swish engine. I think it's going to do wonders for Sojour when it gets incorporated. It already does a lot. Like I say, I'm about halfway through writing it. And as I say, you will see posts of these floaty cubes and that. And don't think the developer is going off on a tangent, because I'm not. I am writing a critical function, the bit that's going to do your maps ready for Sojour 2. That's why you're going to see all those crazy cube posts like this. But hopefully it's all making sense to you. So I appreciate this is probably all big news for a variety of reasons. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them on this video. And if there's anything you want to see in Sojour 2 or anything that's particularly hacking you off in Sojour 1, again, post that in the video comments, because it'll make me think, and the earlier that I can get these designs in, the better. Basically, it's always harder to shoehorn something else in afterwards. Oh, one more thing I need to cover as well, and that is support for the current version of Sojour. So it's still supported. So if people report bugs to me, I'll get on top of them. And in fact, the most recent release last week, I think it was, that was due to a customer reported bug. I will get onto them. And if you read the reviews for Sojour on drive-thru, I think the last 2 reviewers actually mentioned the quick turnaround time on bugs. So I do endeavour to turn those around relatively quickly. And in fact, there's going to be a Sojour 1 release coming up very soon. I'm hoping, cross fingers, this Sunday, because I have a Portuguese customer who wants to use English in Sojour. And that's a problem for Sojour, because Sojour's spell checker detects the language that your operating system is using. So it's caused a few problems there, and I intend to address that. So I am doing Sojour 1 work, and when it comes in, it does take precedence over Sojour 2, simply because Sojour 1 is the app you have in your hands, and I would be negligent in my duty if I didn't keep it at a great working state and at a good quality. So yeah, I guess expect a release pretty soon for that. But ultimately, most of my attention is going to be Sojour 2 from here on in. So that's it. Like, subscribe, all the things. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you folks later.